Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. I am Florina Gelescu from the interactive content creation platform Genially, and we're the host of tonight's webinar. We're here with a panel of experts from the digital learning world to talk about how you can get ahead in instructional design. Now, anyone who ever taken an online training or e-learning course has probably come face to face with some pretty and monotonous material. Many training courses are out of date and fairly unengaging. They're often based on old-fashioned teaching methods. That includes asking learners to read large amounts of text on the screen, memorize information, or repeat the same activity over and over. Training materials are often produced using old school or even obsolete technology. Just think of Doyle PDF, ugly PowerPoint slides with lots of text, or boring tick box exercises. As well as being boring for learners, bad learning materials are bad for the companies and organization delivering the courses to. Poorly designed materials can lead to learners losing interest, switching off to complete the course, and struggling to understand or retain information. If you're familiar with instructional design, you'll know that it was born to solve all these problems. And that's what we're here to take a look tonight. Instructional design is the process of creating effective and engaging learning experiences. As a discipline, it draws on various fields, including UX design, education, and psychology. Its aim is to combine the latest digital technologies and educational methods to create learner-centric materials. Because instructional design focuses on the creation of learning materials, it's sometimes viewed as an add-on or subdivision of traditional training. But as we'll find out in this session, there is a growing recognition of the value that instructional design can bring to all aspects of learning and development. On that note, let me introduce our speakers today. Chairing tonight's roundtable, I'm really happy to welcome John Kilroy, one of the leading experts in the field. John is the founder and the CEO of the Digital Learning Institute, the global leader in digital learning education and certification. He brings over 20 years consultancy experience to our discussion, having advised some of the world's leading companies on learning technology, content development, and learning strategy. Hi, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Farina. Delighted to be here and welcome everyone. And thanks for Genially for organising the roundtable. It's great.
Thank you so much, John. Hope you're doing well.
Good, keeping well. Yeah, loving this platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, on the other hand, please welcome Michelle Doyle. Michelle is a learning technologist at the Royal College of Surgeons, Ireland, based in Dublin. Her background is in visual art, digital media design, and adult education. She recently completed a professional diploma in digital learning design at the Digital Learning Institute, John. Michelle works in the Healthcare Professions Education Center on a postgraduate diploma, which trains healthcare professionals to become educators both in higher education as well as clinical settings. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get to chat to everyone today and see who's here and where they're from.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy having this webinar with you. And also thank you so much for our audience to coming to see today. Okay. So, well, for this session, we prepare some question for you. Okay. And I was wondering if we shall start, if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's go with the first question. And what does a typical day look like for an instructional designer, and what impact has remote working had for you?
you want to kick off, Michelle?
No, you go ahead, John. You
Okay,
start.
sorry. Yeah. No. I think like probably firstly, what I'd say is that it's a really exciting time to be working in instructional design. Like you said there, Florina, there's loads of really exciting career opportunities, but also career paths as well. Like there's an opportunity to diversify into like, you know, let's say accessible universal design, immersive design, social learning. So, you know, really exciting things happening in the space. I think in terms of a typical day in the life of an instructional designer, it probably depends a little bit on the sector that you're working in. So it can differ in corporate learning, it can differ to higher education, further education, and there is a lot of diversity in the role, which can be a challenge as well. But sometimes you might be expected to wear a number of different hats. And, you know, for example, there can be an expectation of instructional designers that you're able to build content, you know, use the likes of Genially to create learning materials. But also, the traditional, I suppose, skill set of an instructional designer is also to work with the business and work with stakeholders. So, like, to define what the problem is, can it be solved with a learning solution? What's the learning gap? The ability to map out a learning experience, the ability to make decisions around different formats. So there's quite a lot of diversity in the role, which is exciting. But so, you know, I guess sometimes that can be a challenge as well, when you're trying to transition between a number of different roles. The hybrid thing is interesting in terms of, obviously, it probably has redefined the role of an instructional designer, but also the expectations of an instructional designer as well, because there's two facets to it. Like, as learning designers now, we need to design for how people work. So people are obviously now working hybrids. They have time when they're at home, they have time when they're in the office, and it's really important that we understand their flow of work. So what does a modern workflow look like? And then, as learning designers or instructional designers, we need to be able to design learning experiences to I suppose, to go parallel with that flow. So there might be an expectation of when people are in the office that we have social experiences and classroom from a blended learning perspective, but when they're at home, then that they might get access to more independent asynchronous learning as well, and making sure that that's a really, really, really positive experience as well. I think if you're an instructional designer as well, the ability to work at home probably gives you more thinking time. So sometimes there's less distractions, because particularly if you're in development mode and you're building, it can be good to be in a let's say a quiet space, and that's definitely been a positive in terms of people working at home. But then there's also that ability. It's important as an instructional designer to build relationships with your subject matter experts and your stakeholders, and sometimes the online element of that can be a challenge. So that sometimes it's good to meet people face to face to build relationships, for example.
So yeah, I'd jump in here just to say I would agree with all that. I probably am one of those instructional designers that actually does wear a lot of hats, because I work on a small course, and I would end up doing a lot of my day would look like, as John said, you know, maybe a couple of different jobs rolled up into one. So I do a bit of student support, and I would also do a bit of design build. But as John said as well, I would tend to go into the office quite a lot, because I can get instant sign-offs on things off the subject matter experts. It's much easier for me to train people in on the different types of content I want. One of the big things we're working on here at the moment is we work on a diploma for healthcare professionals to enter to become educators themselves in higher education or in clinical settings. And one of the things we're trying to do is to reduce how long our live sessions were, because when we went online, we threw everything from the lecture hall online, and it was a 3-hour long session, and people were, you know, really, really fatigued at the end of it. So we've been doing a lot to make a lot more asynchronous content. So that means a lot more video content, a lot more podcasts. So we're still in the process of designing a lot of that at the moment, and getting feedback from our users and seeing how things are going. So a lot of the time, like, I'll be working with different staff members here to create videos. So that's my kind of day in the life of, and I've only ever worked hybrid. You know, I've never worked in this job fully in an office or fully at home. I've always had to go in and get things signed off on. I'm not sure with higher education if it is possible to work fully remote in this type of work, because so much of what we do is, you know, trying to help people who might not have the best technical skills but have the best professional skills get online and be able to teach online.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Thank you so much. And well, maybe if you have another pandemic, there you can do it remotely.
Yeah. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Wigwa. And I mean, that's a good start, and I really love it. And I guess just as our audience, we are discovering like a whole new world here, right? And it's very interesting to have your both insights, right? As you as an educator as well, and you, John. And let's go with the second question. Okay. I mean, if you want to add anything else for the first question, feel free.
No, I just think
Okay.
on the point there, Florina, it's just, you mentioned there it is a whole new world, and I think it's important that it's okay to experiment. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
we don't have to know all the answers now, and I think as an instructional designers, a lot of people are going through transition at the moment. They might be transitioning from classroom design into like Michelle was saying there, into online. And I think we need to nearly try things, and it's kind of okay to fail a little bit. Get feedback from our learners. And because it is important as instructional designers that we kind of have that experimenting mentality or that mindset. And but we can move quickly as well. So like if you're like, one of the benefits of Genially is that you can create content really quickly, try it out, get feedback, go again. And I just think that's important. I just think it's important that we don't put too much pressure on ourselves as instructional designers to get it right straight away.
Indeed. Yeah. Totally agree with you. Okay, so what advice would you give to people interested in breaking into the profession?
Yeah, I think again, I think it's again, there's loads of job opportunities, right? So there's been a 300% increase in job vacancies, and a lot of sectors can't get good people in this space. And the good news for people, like, there's probably two scenarios here. You'll have people that are already working in education and learning and development that are maybe looking to transition into, let's say, instructional design, and then you've got people who are from a non-learning background, have no experience in this area, that are also transitioning as well. And the good news is that employers are looking to bring more diversity into the learning and development team, because traditionally learning and development would have been quite, you would have worked your career up to a number of different roles, and it wouldn't have been common to see people come from marketing or product development or sales into learning and development. But that's changing now. So employers are bringing people in to get more diversity, because I guess what we need now from instructional designers is that ability to work with the business or to work with stakeholders. And sometimes having that diversity helps with the thinking within the team. So I think, if you're already working in learning, development, or education, it's about giving yourself an opportunity to get access to digital learning projects, just to practice, to get it, because you do need to get an insight into those hats that Michelle mentioned there, because there is a different hats that you have to wear, and it's not necessarily that easy to transition between the hats, particularly if your classic developer role is quite different to, let's say, an instructional design role. And there can be an expectation of employers that you can do both, but the skill set is really, really different. Like if I'm a developer, I'm working on Genially or an authoring tool, and I technically know how to use it, and I'm good with technology. If I'm an instructional designer, I'm more involved in decision-making, mapping learning experience. So I think it's important that you find where you're most comfortable and where your passion might be from an instructional design perspective, and that ability. And, building up your e-portfolio of work is really important. Networking is really important, that you actually get access to communities. Getting certified can be really helpful, and we can help there. And all those things are I guess, stepping stones to making the transition, I guess.
Yeah, I would add as well, one of the big things I've found really helpful as I've started this career is going to conferences, whether they're academic conferences or more about like the technology that's used conferences, meeting other people who work in this field and getting a look under the dashboard. It's really, really keeps you on top of your game, just seeing like what other institutions and companies are using as their VLE, what they're doing that's different, really, and going with a big open mind as well to these things, and getting to know the people there as well, because it's an emerging field. And I feel like the one thing that everyone has in common there is that everyone has nothing in common, like that everyone is from different backgrounds. I met someone recently who does the equivalent of my job in Cork, and she's from a neuroscience background and I'm from an art background, and we're doing the exact same job. So I think it's, as John said, like it's a really like diverse field. Like the types of jobs people are coming from into it are really, really different. And I think as well, like, you know, in my kind of role, a role where you might be on a smaller team and you are going to be wearing a lot of different hats, I found that, you know, being able to do a bit of coding, a bit of HTML, you don't need to be amazing at it, a bit of HTML, a bit of CSS, being able to use content creation programs like Photoshop or even Canva is absolutely perfect for what you need, and to be able to plan. And I think one of the things that I was really struggling with when I started this job is that, you know, I was working with a bigger cohort. I was a learning technologist in my last job, and I was dealing with a smaller cohort over a longer period of time. But in the Royal College of Surgeons, it's bigger, there's bigger expectations. And I found that taking on the diploma in the Digital Learning Institute taught me a lot about workflows. And I think workflows are really, really important, you know, understanding, you know, not just how to edit the video, but why are you making the video and who is it for? And, you know, how are you going to open the video? How are you going to close the video? How many points are you going to make in the video? So I think workflows, wireframing, that's really important. That's the nuts and bolts. But at the core of it, and the most important thing of all, is I think like the kind of philosophy behind learning, you know, like getting to grips with the education and training frameworks, you know. I think that they are the core of what we do. We never just, you know, make a forum. We're doing a forum because it's part of like a community of interest. We're doing it because it's part of a constructivist classroom, you know. So we have a reason for doing all these things. And that reason is based in hundreds of years of pedagogy. So, you know, like we're not reinventing the book. We're just adding tools to something that already exists.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in terms of, again, for people that are transitioning in, that, you know, when you come in for the first time, it's important that, because you can get overwhelmed with the technology because there's tech everywhere. You know, there's LMS systems and authoring tools. And sometimes when people are transitioning into this space, they are quite tech focused because they think that's kind of what it's about. Whereas it's really important that initially you get comfortable with the building blocks or the principles of learning design, like Michelle mentioned there. And those principles are built on theory that's been there for, you know, for 100 years, and those theories are as relevant now as they were then. But from an instructional design perspective, you just need to try to get comfortable converting theory into principles, so principles of design, and then get comfortable then applying the principles. So, you know, how do I practically apply them? And that's when, you know, Michelle touched on things like wireframes and tools, and then the tech then, to a certain extent, will look after itself. You know, and there's brilliant tools out there, like obviously like Genially, that will facilitate a learning design, but you got to make sure that you get your design principles right first, because if you've got good design principles, it builds your confidence as an instructional designer, and you get more comfortable pushing back, and you get more comfortable asking questions, and because you got to get comfortable asking the why question all the time, because not every problem is solved with learning. You know, there's other potential solutions, and we got to make sure that we're able to, you know, that we can consult as much and influence people as much as anything.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And actually, there are lots of tools, and you need to know why you have to use that tool. I mean, because we have lots of options, and this is true that maybe some trainers or even educators sometimes they feel lost in because like it's like a big sea with lots of tools out there, and you don't even know which one to pick, and this is like a big problem. So I totally agree with you, John, and also Michelle. And yeah, and I do believe as well that the thing that you already said here, this transition is not only in instructional design, it's everywhere. So it happened maybe to me years ago when I made this transition to marketing, for example. So it's everywhere. So it's great to know it and to lose this fear to change, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I love this conversation. Okay, I have another question for you. And what's involved in the design process or creating learning materials?
Yeah, and I know Michelle's going to jump in and showcase some stuff here. So I think, like, you know, the good news is if you're coming into instructional design, it has loads of processes, right? You know, it's a bit like there's a lot of learning theory, but there's also a lot of really defined instructional design models there. So whether it's ADDIE or SAM or backward design or waterfall techniques. So there's plenty of process there. Now they all generally have similar phases, right? There's typically an analysis phase, there's a design, like a build, and a implementation, and then obviously an evaluation. Now I think what tends to happen with these processes is that we kind of dive into, let's say, build quite early, and sometimes sometimes the most important phase to get right is the analysis phase at the start, in terms of when you're trying to define the scope of the project. And a lot of when you're at that phase is about making sure you get comfortable with 4 key questions, which is: who are your audience? And getting really clear on your personas. Why is this happening? Like, what's the context, the problem, and the objectives? The what is your content, so your ability to get a really clear sense of your curriculum and how that breaks down. And the more you break it down, the better. And then the last question then is the how, which is what is the right learning experience to address those 3 questions. And spending a bit of time on those questions is really important before you get into design and development. And then equally, then the other phase we tend to neglect is the actual rollout. So sometimes there's a bit of a thing where we'll build it and they'll come, but they don't always come. So you need to have engagement tactics. You need to think about your rollout. You need to think about how you're going to communicate, how you're going to support your learners when they're going through the experience, how you're going to manage the actual user, the UX, and all that's part of it, and how you're going to evaluate impact as well. So there's a lot involved in it. I just think it's important that we don't get too focused too quickly on the design build phase to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in here, and I'm just gonna show. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So as part of the professional diploma in digital learning, which is John's course, I made this scoping and analysis document, and this is using Genially. And at the time I was trying to, I'd started this job, I didn't really understand it. And through doing this process of the who, why, and what, I was able to look at who our learners were and create personas, bring them through like the learning gap and the business model for what we were trying to create and how we would move forward to the next stage of it. And this is a document from the course, but it's a document that I've been able to use through loads of different funding meetings, even as well. Like, we have a strategy document in this too. If you are creating courses, it's likely you're going to be working with strategy in your institution or in your company. So where does the training fit into the strategy? This is a part of it too. So we're looking at who and why. Why is this? Why do we need this training, and what is it going to fulfill for us? I found Genially was a really nice way to make this as well, because you don't want to be sending people on like reams and reams of data, and sometimes policy documents can be very difficult for people. They can be hard to jump into. You just need something that's like a quick explainer. Someone can go through it themselves. They can dive in a bit more if they want to. They can actually read full PDF documents on it. So it was a really good thing to learn, I think, as well, in the course. And it was a really good process to go through. And it's something that I feel like I'm going to be returning to each year. This is as part of our ADDI process. I'll be coming back to this next year, and I'll be looking at like, who were the personas I said last year, and are they updating? Our course is internal as well as external. We're basically expanding next year, and there's a lot more at stake. So being able to actually show a document like this in a way like this, it's very, very handy.
Yeah, and I think like Michelle was saying there, like that's one of the kind of benefits of Genie as well, is that you can use it as a design tool as well as an actual tool for creating learning materials as well, which is because you do need to think about how you're going to manage stakeholders during the process. And like Michelle was saying there, you want to get sign off early on so that you're not going through rounds of feedback when you get into the development, because that's the challenge. Like when you're working with SMEs, like your biggest pain point is going to be working with subject matter experts, because some of them don't want to be SMEs and they just want to give you content and let disappear. So you do need to have a way of working with them, and the easier you make the process, the better. And that's why, like the way Michelle has laid that out there, it's so visual. It's easy for them to explore the some of the design principles, I guess, that are there. So, just thinking about little things like that can have a really big impact on the process.
Yeah, and I think one thing I learned a lot from your course as well was that actually, as part of my job, I have to, onboard people to work with me, and I have to give people frameworks for the type of content I want. Like one time I asked someone in a previous role, for slides for a SCORM activity, and the person sent me 160 slides. No one's going to be able to do anything that's 160 slides long. That's not possible. So it's kind of turning you into an editor. So had I set that up and been like, well, I'm going to need 10 interactive slides, and those slides are going to be all you're going to give me. That's all I want.
Yeah.
So it's kind of about setting a sort of boundary as well about like what you need for the design process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as well, like it's important that you onboard your SMEs outside of a project. You know what I mean? So like, onboard them on their role and the process, like initially before you get into any project with them. Because if you do it within a project, they're already, in the mindset of the project, and they're just thinking about content and get it across. So your ability to influence and onboard subject matter experts, and actually to have a process to give them, so it's important that you have a process, but it's also equally important that you get these subject, because sometimes when you show subject matter experts a process, they're thinking more work. That's what they're going to see. They'll see a process and think, like, I've got a day job and you're asking me to do X, Y, and Z. So you got to kind of sell the process in such a way as that this is actually going to reduce your workload, make your life easier, and it's going to give them an even better learning experience at the end. And you're going to, that's going to help your profile as a subject matter expert within the organization. So all these things are really important that, as an instructional designer, these are the most important things that the things you need to get right, because it makes your life easier then when you get into build and into rollout. So I think it's really great that Michelle has that now as a kind of a structure that she can use, like she said there, every year kind of thing, which is cool.
Indeed. Absolutely. I'm taking notes about everything you said, guys. Thank you so much. And well, thank you also so much for your kind words about our platform. So my heart melted. Okay, thank you so much. I'm very happy to I'm very happy to hear when someone uses us, and we know that it's very helpful for you. So it's such a joy to hear your words. Thank you. So here goes one of my favorite questions. What are the main authoring tools you use for your design work? I mean, which software does every instructional design need to know about, and what skills do you need to use it?
You go ahead here, Michelle.
Yeah, I think like one thing I think that is a really good thing to do, if you can get your hands on a Moodle sandbox, I think being able to try out Moodle and being able to put up content, know how to enroll people on Moodle. You can set up a website and you can install Moodle yourself. You can do it with a company like Bluehost. You can do this in the background using cPanel. And I'm not a developer, and I was able to do this. And once you have a Moodle site, anything you make, then you're showcasing your ability to be able to upload content. Then after that, I think Canva is a really, really amazing tool for collaboration. And Canva is it's on the up and up. And, the CEO of Canva, I think she wants to put Microsoft Docs out of business. So I think we have to get on board with Canva and see where this is going, because it is absolutely amazing, like the stuff they've done. One thing that's really useful with Canva is I can train other people who have very, very like low or beginner tech skills how to make their own videos using their own cameras at home. So they can be making explainer videos. They can make their own presentation slides and do talking presentations in front of them. Stuff like that is brilliant, and you can download it. You can put it on your VLE. Now they have a way of embedding it. Genially is really, really useful as well. I know I'm plugging Genially to Genially. I might be like, preaching from the pulpit, but like this. Unfortunately, like for a lot of us on Moodle on 3.8, we're still working with like a very like basic form of Moodle. I know Moodle 4.0 is quite slick. But sometimes, you know, it can be hard to make engaging materials. And, you know, even I was saying to Florina before this, some of the stuff I do on Genially is so boring. But it's not. It's just basic. Like, as in, I'll be making infographics, or I'll make a calendar for a class. I'll be making, you know, a way for the students to be able to look at all their learning outcomes by using a hotspot. Things like that is going to make it so much more interactive than just text. And, you know, what we want to be doing is trying to keep people alive. You know, we want to keep people alive on the VLE and not to be kind of, you know, feeling fatigued. And we want to be trying to like chunk our stuff and keep it all nice and folded, keep it away, you know. And yeah, so I would say, and then as well, for if you are someone who is going to be working in live sessions, I think Miro is a really great tool to be using for live sessions. I think there's a lot you can do with Miro. Miro is an online whiteboard program where you can see people moving around the board. You can see their mouse with their name on top of it. And it is one of the most interactive ways to run a session. And, you know, you can have people putting post-it notes. You can have a way of giving people in your classroom instant feedback. And they can also be giving peer feedback as well. So it's really, really untapped, I feel like, in terms of education. There was a community forum on Miro, and we were only a few people like last year, and now there's hundreds in it. So it seems to be a really growing technology, I feel. And you can also, like with Genially, Canva, Miro, you can also use an iframe. So you can put that onto your VLE, and that's really, really important. If there's no iframe, there's no point.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with all that. I think as well, you know, so initially as an instructional designer, it's good to get a sense of what the different formats are, you know, like, you know, because one of the things with the more we digitize learning, the more options we're going to have. So we might have, you know, like Michelle mentioned video there, but even when you get into video, you got different types of video. You've animated videos, you've got screencasts, instructional videos, interactive videos, you've multimedia e-learning, you've got podcasts, you've got micro learning, you've got learning aids. So there's a lot of kind of choice, and sometimes choice can create complexity. But, you know, but that doesn't mean you have to have loads of tech either. Like sometimes having a suite of 3 to 4 tools is enough. So like, you know, and definitely the likes of Canva as a design tool, because you can integrate Canva into your authoring tools, you know, so it's not like standalone. It pops into other areas. You know, and then from an authoring perspective, you got the likes of Genially, but Genially and Canva can work together. You know what I mean? So you can, like, it's not, you know, sometimes I might, you know, Genially could be the front end, but then I branch off into Canva to explore more. You know, so you don't necessarily need to have loads of tech. You know, so a lot of the tools now are multi-purpose, and they give you loads of templates. So it's not like you have to be a visual designer or a graphic designer, because the you know, Genially and Canva and these tools kind of do that work for you to a certain extent, because they give you templates, and that is really helping instructional designers also become developers. And I know I said earlier, I'm kind of contradicting myself, because I said earlier it's not that easy of a transition to make, but sometimes like what we're seeing now is the tech is making that transition a little bit easier to make because of let's say the templates that are there as well. And yeah, the other one I throw, like a Miro, I'd agree. We use Padlet quite a lot as a social learning tool. You know, I know Michelle would have experienced that on the program. So Padlet is kind of a tool that you can use for social sharing, very like Miro, but they work well together as well. So sometimes you can actually have Padlet integrates into Miro. So I think it's about not having too much, you know, because and then underpinning all that, then you'll have your learning platform, which is your Moodles and your learning experience platforms. And there's a lot of change happening in that space at the moment. There's a lot of I guess it was quite segmented, let's say, before the pandemic. Like you had LXPs and you had LMSs and you had LSPs and all these like loads of different types of platforms. But we're definitely seeing a convergence now of platforms where it's just going to be a learning platform, not an LMS, not an LXP. It's just a place where people go to learn. And we're probably seeing now that it will be the likes of your Microsoft Teams, your Slacks, your more of your social platforms is where people will go to learn. And the LMS will be more used for report, like the likes of a Moodle would be a reporting platform, not necessarily a delivery platform. And I think that's all. I think that's all really positive as well.
Yeah, and as as lovely and as like beautiful as a lot of like these tools and content creation things are, we find the thing that is the most popular with our students is forums, and they love talking to one another. And like unfortunately, like with our platform, like with Moodle, it's hard to make a forum look lovely, and it doesn't matter to the students because they're talking to one another and they're learning from one another there. And there's a lot of ways to set up really good topics where people are, they're sharing life experiences, they're reflecting, and a lot of like the best tools are kind of very simple. And I think reflective journals as well, and setting up, you might think this seems very like old-fashioned or dated, but when the students are getting personal and they're really thinking about their learning, they're learning so much. So we see like really good uptake of tools like that, and they are from the box on Moodle.
Yeah, and I think as well, like you're spot on, Michelle. Like like if I was buying an LMS tomorrow, my number one feature would be their social learning features, and how what does the actual experience look like within the social, within that social experience, so that it's not clunky. It's more like what they're going to be experiencing on platforms like Slack and so on. So I think it's I think definitely social is really important, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Taking notes or some insights. For example, yes, and someone mentioned learning fatigue here, and I think they're right. No, so you say that of course there are lots of options outside, and you can use very nice templates out there, but you need to create something valuable for them as well, and not be very tired of using lots also in this digital era, right?
Yeah,
No.
I think like one thing that's really I suppose like useful for addressing learner fatigue is that like a lot of the time we are giving too much content to people. And sometimes, I mean, especially from both of our perspectives, because we both work on education courses courses where people will work in education in some way or another, that like actually it's really important for our learners to learn how to create. And I think like the course that I work on, we probably learn a lot from John's course as well, that like some of the assessments we do in medical education could actually be, our students could be making videos. We could be doing group work where students are collaborating on a presentation, so that we're kind of more flipping the classroom and we're giving these tools over to the students to produce work. And of course, then, if you have students who are willing, if you have really good examples, you can get the examples off the students for next year's cohort. So you're getting more content out of the students to bring back into the VLE, so there's kind of like this nice cycle of things coming back in. And, you're sending people out into the world then who have tools that they're going to be proud of, and that's great for your course as well.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I mean, this whole thing about engagement and like, at the end of the day, you got to get the why question right. And like, every learner is going to be asking, what's in it for me? Like, why am I doing this? And I think that's your starting point to a certain extent. And then, like Michelle was saying there, it is important then to give them a lot of diversity in the learning experience, a lot of choice, because the more choice you give people, the more personalized it feels. So maybe during the pandemic, there was an initial transition into live delivery. So we went classroom to virtual classroom, and definitely people got Zoom fatigue and MS fatigue, and there was all that kind of just too much synchronous delivery. And but I think there's a bit of an appreciation now that, it is about a blended experience. It is about giving people, getting them into a bit of a flow where they can, when they want to, they can look at some content, but it's in the context of doing an activity. So like Michelle was saying there, that we're giving them opportunities to create, to socialize that, and to socialize the creation as well. So it's not about me creating a video or creating an asset. It's about me being able to create it, share it, and reflect on it. But also, if I don't know what to do, I can also watch a video or look at a learning material or look at a learning aid to support that activity. So, and then I come to the classroom and I might go into a deeper level of learning where I might do skills practice and role play. So there's a role now for and then we've immersive learning and all this. So there's plenty of choices there. But I think as an instructional designer, you got to get really comfortable making the decisions around these choices, and also comfortable about mapping out the flow that the learner is going to go through, because there's a lot of touch points, and the learner has to get comfortable with that flow. And part of your role as an instructional designer is helping them to understand the flow, which is really important.
Yeah, and I think your course did something that I think is really, really great as well, that you didn't overload people, and you always ended, let's say, like each lesson with, here's some further links. So there's kind of more there if you want to go a bit deeper, which I thought that's really like user-centered. It's really student-centered. It's great, because there are some people who will go off and read the 5 different articles, and I think that's great because it is giving people like, more options as well. And
yeah.
I think as well, like another thing that John's course did that I really, really liked was at the end of each module, we were able to download a PDF of it, and it's something really simple. But I kept all the PDFs and I refer back to them. I'm like, okay, well, how do I do a wireframe for a video? I can just go back and check it in the PDF. So giving people like some form of documentation that they will use again. So I think it's all about like, creating like, I don't know, because you could be like in a situation where the course ends and that's it. You're like, okay, where's everything? How do I access things? But you're giving people these really great documents to take away with them as well.
Yeah, like I mean, like and on that, a lot of that is from an accessibility perspective as well. So, like as an instructional designer, it's funny now with digital learning, people are more open about learning disabilities than they may have been when they were coming to classroom-based learning. They're like, but the flip side of that is we can now support them more as well with technology to support people with different ways of universal design and accessibility. And sometimes when it comes to accessibility and universal design, it's just about giving people choice. Whether they can listen to something, read something, that they can manage their own pace, which is one of the benefits of digital learning, is that we can kind of control the learning experience a bit more than maybe a live session. So we're in the classroom, it's very much controlled by the trainer or the educator to a certain extent, okay? And there's less scope to personalize it from an accessibility perspective. But with a digital experience, you can give people a much more let's say universal and accessible experience as well. I think that's really powerful, and it's something as an instructional designer that you do need to be like. Accessibility and universal design is a really important skill set of an instructional designer now. Like I probably would have it number one, and in your toolkit of principles.
Yeah, and like I completely agree. And like, I suppose one of the core principles from universal design for learning is if we do it for one person, it's likely will help more people. So for instance, like if you add captions to your video, it could go on to help more than just one person for one different situation, and I think that's a really, really, a really important thing to be thinking about the whole time. Like it's never at the back of your mind, it's always at the front of your mind. And I think it maybe goes back as well to the planning and making your personas, that some of those personas will have to be representative of different learning styles or different abilities as well. That you need to be thinking about this from before your course is even designed. You need to bring in these personas.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, guys. Actually, so much to learn from both of you. And right now, I'm feeling like a sponge absorbing all the information. And I'd like to know our audience opinion as well, if they have any question, so we can answer them later. And here we have our last question. Okay. Can you share any general advice for creating engaging and effective learning materials?
Yeah, I think. Sorry,
go on.
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, the one thing I was going to say was I think a really good metric of success with it is analytics. And one of the things that we see a lot of with our video content is people go back and they repeat watch it. So I think if people are going back and watching things 3 or 4 times, that like they're learning a lot from it and they want to go back and they're watching it again. So like I need to have analytics.
Yeah, I think you're like that analytics is so important. Like, Michelle mentioned there a few times about getting a good sense of what the learner preferences are, and sometimes that's something you can capture in your personas, but over time you need to be tracking those preferences with data. But it's not about the data though; it's more about the insights that you get from that. So like, what insights are we looking for? So being really clear about, I suppose, what you're trying to measure, like from a preferences perspective, and then over time, then that data will just allow you to make better decisions. Because it's a lot of this is the more, I suppose, the more tools we have to make decisions, the better the learning experience is going to be. And that's why it's important now that you do have frameworks for gathering data, but also being really clear about, it's not just about the data, it's about what insights are we looking for and what decisions do we want to make off the back of it. But like, I think a lot of it, with all this stuff, it starts with your learning objectives. Like that's your starting point, and the how deep the learning, I think Michelle's gone, how deep the learning needs to go. So is it surface level learning, or is it deep levels of learning? And basically then, depending on that, you need to be able to decide on what the learning experience needs to look like based on those learning objectives. So the things like Michelle was saying there about learning personas, learning objectives, these are the things that if you get that bit right, it does increase the possibility that you'll have a much more successful, engaging experience.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, John. Lost Michelle. I guess she doesn't have great. Oh no, she's here. Welcome back, Michelle.
Sorry, the internet just went down in RCSI, so I'm back in a hotspot.
Oh, really? Well done.
No worries. Okay, so thank you so much for all the insights. I really like this our event and all the information you offer us. John, there is a question for you on the chat. I've just seen it. So someone, Kylie, can put it here. She's interested to know more about your content.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have it's a diploma in digital learning design. The initial modules on the program go back into, I suppose, take a bit of a step back and build kind of foundations. So looking at that learning theory piece that Michelle mentioned, but how does that learning theory connect with design principles? So from a design principle perspective, we're looking at universal design, instructional design, learning experience design, but also visual design as well. So like I said at the start, is as an instructional designer, get your principles right first. And then the program then very much moves into kind of practical application of those principles then. So actually getting into a real life project, like Michelle was saying there, and actually practicing that, creating personas, and then looking at different formats of digital learning. So whether it's multimedia, video-based learning, social learning, immersive learning, like where do I use it? How do I do it? And what's the tools that you use to facilitate it? So it's very, practical from that perspective. And then I guess then at the end, then kind of wrapping it up with how do I roll it out? And how do I use data to make better decisions? So I suppose what we're trying to do is give people like the end-to-end, let's say, skills that they need to become a modern digital learning professional, and with tools that you can take away. Like it's important for us that our community has practical tools that they can use. And obviously, a lot of our students actually use Genially on the diploma, so like they get exposed to Genially for the first time. And they use it on their projects as well. Like they use it actually not just on the end result, like I said earlier, but actually to do the stuff like Michelle mentioned, like your scoping document and your storyboards and your wireframes. So, plenty of practical application is really good.
Yeah, we've shared a link to John courses as well on our chat. Okay, so you can check them out if you're interested. Okay. Well, we finish. I haven't found any other question, so I don't know if you'd like to add anything else or.
No, like I think if I just encourage you, if you're thinking of making the jump, I like the most important question is that you're passionate about learning. That's the if it doesn't matter what background you're from. Whether you're, like Michelle was saying there, from neuroscience or from the arts or from marketing. I think if you've got a passion for helping people learn and for education, that's the starting point. And then really from there, then there's ways then that you can develop your skills and your confidence in the space. And if you're already in the space, then equally, then it's a really exciting, opportunities to maybe diversify into other areas as well. So I think it's a really exciting time for learning, for education, and I think if you're trying to make the decision, I just go for it.
Yeah, and I think John had some great advice earlier on as well, that sometimes you have to make mistakes as well, and like every day I'm learning, every day I in a process of like trying things out and experimenting on the VLE, and then maybe I'll spend the next fortnight apologizing en masse in emails to people about a mistake I made in it. But the whole time is learning, and like, it's a really creative space. It's really exciting, and it's great to be a part of an emerging field,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. It was so great to learn from both of you. Thank you for joining us today and sharing so many interesting and useful insights. And a big thank you as well to all of you out there who join us on the other side of the screen. And well, hopefully we can see each other at our next event. And that's it. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Cheers.